Hello, Elaine here, proud ambassador of the Royal Voluntary Service, and I'm absolutely delighted to be in the virtual village hall to answer some of your fabulous questions. But before I start, I just did want to say a huge thank you to all of you wonderful volunteers out there, whether you're making companionship phone calls or delivering shopping or driving people to and fro their medical appointments. You really are all doing an absolutely sterling job and keeping the country moving basically during these incredibly challenging times. So thank you really from the bottom of my heart. All right then, well, right, here we go. Let's go to the first question, and it's from Amanda McQuaid. And Amanda asks, if there was a film made of your remarkable life, who would you want to play you? Well, I have to tell you, Amanda, that is a pretty difficult question because there are so many talented young actresses out there right now, but thinking about it, I was thinking it might be good if we could find somebody that is unknown, possibly. Someone who's perhaps been to drama school, been devoting themselves to their craft and been training and needs a break. And it would be wonderful to be able to have something like this to give them their chance, just as I did with Evita. So can't imagine that they're ever going to make anything about me in my life. And then Jenny Addis, she asks, what was your favourite role to play in musical theatre? Well, that's also a rather difficult question, Jenny, because my favourite role always seemed to be the one that I was playing at any given time. But having thought about that as well, I think probably Evita stands out to me because, well, let's face it, without that role, I probably wouldn't be standing here in the virtual village hall answering these wonderful questions. Instead, what I might be doing? I might be being a nursery school nurse, perhaps, or I might have followed my mother into millinery because she was a wonderful milliner. But instead, here I am, because playing Evita, well, I mean, that really did change my life. And it was a wonderful challenge because it had a score, really, of operatic proportions, most definitely. And one had to, of course, negotiate that incredible score. And, of course, it also had a wonderful storyline. It was the Cinderella, wasn't it? The Cinderella story from rags to riches. Yeah, I'm also glad that she was only 5'2", Eva Perron. Otherwise, I, again, might not be here. But also, I think playing the great tragic role of Norma Desmond in Sunset Boulevard was also a standout role for me because it was, 18 years down the line from first playing Evita here in London, it finally took me to Broadway. So I hope that answers your question. All right, well now, Adam Auld, you have asked, Adam, what is my favourite costume of all time? Well, goodness me. These are tricky questions, I must say. Well, I think probably the Dior copy of the wonderful ball gown that I wore in Evita. That is a standout. It was a standout dress as well, as I remember. It was a beautiful copy of a Dior ball gown, all hand beaded, and it was pretty stunning. I think also the leopard gown that I wore in Sunset Boulevard as Norma Desmond, another huge underwired skirt to it, and that was pretty amazing. But I think probably, unlikely as it may seem, I think my old Grisabella cat costume from Cats is the one that I'm going to choose as my all-time favourite, I think, because, that musical was ahead of its time in the first place. It had Gillian Lynn's wonderful choreography, and it also had John Napier's brilliant set and costume designs, which were, again, ahead of their time. I mean, all those costumes were made up of little bits of fur or wool and knitted leg warmers and so on and so forth. And I remember he made me a special pair of rather glittery gloves with red fingernails attached to them because the title of my cat was Grisabella the Glamour Cat. So she was once rather glamorous in her heyday. And also I think I've chosen cats because somewhat 21 years after we first opened, I was able to pass the baton, if you like, over to Les Miserables when they took over as the longest running musical in the West End from Cats. And as I say, it was 21 years, and so I handed over my Grisabella coat, much to my sadness, but you have to pass things on down to the next generation. Now, Claire Martin, you ask, what effect is COVID-19 having on the theatre industry, and how do I think we're going to cope? Well, Claire, I mean, it has been, it still is, well, it's having a devastating effect on our industry. So many theatres are closed for a start because of social distancing. It means that anybody wanting to open a theatre, even though we can now perform indoors, the situation is that because of social distancing, the seating, it means that probably only half a house can be seated. And so in a way, that means that the revenue is going to be under par, really. And it means that both staff, front of house and behind the scenes, as well as the actors and singers and dancers and chorus people, and everybody, it means, is, well, a lot of these performers are struggling, really struggling, because they are out of work with no means of making an income. The Arts Council, on a positive note, however, have announced a substantial amount of funding for organisations and also for individual and freelance artists. But the trouble is whether or not this is going to be enough, really, to weather the storm into next year, because it really does look like it's going to be 2021 before any theatres are really able to open in any real meaningful way. I mean, already many regional theatres, they're already, well, going into receivership, frankly, and it is, yes, it's a very, very worrying time for so many people. But you know what? The theatre community, we are resilient. We are, and we're positive. So we will be back, you know, because the old saying is the show must go on. So we will. I hope we will. Fingers crossed. Well, this question is from Marianne Thomas, and Marianne wants to know, what musical or play will you want to see first once theatres have reopened their door? Well, I'm very much looking forward to seeing the musical Cinderella. It's from the pen of Andrew Lloyd Webber, and it's a complete reinvention of the classic fairy tale of Cinderella. The lyrics are written by a good friend of mine, David Zippel, and he's somebody who's had a lot of big hits in film, particularly with Disney, and animated film at that, Hercules and Mulan. So I think we're going to have good words, which will be wonderful. It's scheduled to open in April next year, and it's going to be at the newly named Gillian Lynn Theatre, which was formerly, of course, the New London Theatre, where Cats premiered. And yeah, so that's definitely in my diary as one that I want to go and see next year, when we're all back where we belong. Well, this question is from Helen Bond, and Helen asks, can you name one artist, dead or alive, who you'd love to duet with? Oh, well, that's easy, Helen. I would like to duet, or would have, with Judy Garland. She was a bit of a heroine of mine. She had such a wonderful powerhouse of a voice, wonderful, good actress, and a dancer. So she was basically your triple threat. And yes, I mean, she had a vibrant voice. She had wonderful, rich and powerful, unusual phrasing as well. So that was something that made her stand out, I think. She was really second to none. and some of the television performances I've seen of her when she's been duetting with various artists, she's the one that you can't take your eyes off. She's the one that pulls you in. You can't stop watching her. So, yeah, that would have been a great thrill. And Rebecca Mathias, you want to know, if I could star in any musical in the West End, which would it be? Well, that's quite an interesting one. Well, quite a few, actually. Rebecca, I always wanted to have played the role that Liza Minnelli played in Cabaret. That's one. I wanted to play the feisty role in Kiss Me Kate, and also Gypsy. All three, which I never managed to get to. I was too busy sort of getting involved in modern musicals with the Tim Rice and Andrew Lloyd Webber scenario. But the one I think most of all that I loved as a young artist that I would have wanted to play was Lerner and Lowe's My Fair Lady. I wanted to play Eliza Doolittle because she's the young flower girl who transports herself from the Cockney flower girl to passing off as a princess later in the show at the society ball, and after having had her bad vowel sounds ironed out. It's a wonderful score, wonderful. Like, wouldn't it be lovely? Then the furious, and she's furious when she says, "Just you wait, Henry Higgins, just you wait." And the song that I learned as a young girl at singing lessons, which I remember very fondly, I could have danced all night. So that would have been a good one to have done, but I'm way past playing Eliza Doolittle now. Joe Moorhen. Well, your question, Joe, says, of all the fabulous shows you've been in, which has been the most challenging and why? P.S. I love your radio programme. Well, thank you, Joe. I'm glad that you listen in every Sunday and that you're enjoying the programme. As far as your question goes, there's been a couple of rather challenging shows for me in my career. One was The King and I, and the other was Piaf. The King and I was a situation where my king was an actor, a film actor, who hadn't had any stage experience whatsoever, and after 3 months he left the production to leave me with 9 months of rehearsing every day various new kings and playing the show, of course, at night. So to say it was tiring was an understatement. Piaf, of course, is another show that was a play initially with snippets of songs in. And Sir Peter Hall was the director, and because I was a singer, he wanted to embellish the snippets of songs into full-blown songs. So it was a play with 14 full-blown songs added to it, which meant that it ran for over 3 hours. I was involved in practically every scene, was never off stage, and it really was jolly exhausting, I can tell you. I mean, Piaf, the life she led was a bit of a roller coaster life. It killed her, and playing her nearly killed me, I can tell you. Moving along now to Catherine Almond. You want to know, Catherine, how I've managed to keep my voice sounding faultless and strong after such a long and illustrious career. Any tips? Well, Catherine, I've got to tell you, it's like being an athlete, really. You have to basically take care of yourself, body and soul. You have to make sure you have a good diet, no cheese or chocolate or alcohol, because that's all bad news for the vocal cords. You have to get a lot of rest. Equally, you have to take physical exercise, and tennis has always been my thing. So, but to try and play a game of tennis or even get into the gym for half an hour, as well as performing 8 shows a week every night, is pretty hard going. But what can I say? It's basically, in the end, like living like a nun. You have to just protect your physical health, because you need a great deal of stamina to play 8 shows a week. I think the other thing is that during the day, if you're singing in a major role, you have to kind of protect your voice as much as possible. So not talking, that's pretty hard for me to do. All right, Jackie Baldy. Now, Jackie, you want to know what has kept me sane during the pandemic. Well, it's interesting. I'm sure, like most people, I have missed seeing my family and friends and being able to go out for dinner with pals, things like that. Ordinary things that in the past we've taken so much for granted. But I think overall, when it happened, I thought, well, the only way through this is to take a positive approach. And I tried to keep a structure to my daily life. I've been able to do things that, well, more things that I think in the past, always running to different appointments and the pressures on to work. I've been able to read a lot more than I normally do. I've looked up recipes and broadened my horizons where cooking is concerned, which has not been too good in some respects. I've put on a couple of pounds. What else have I done? Oh, I've learned obviously to do things like this, self-taping, and of course now I'm back on the tennis court, so that keeps me very happy indeed, and it also helps with the weight. I'm trying to get those pounds off. Vicky Woodrow. Vicky, your question is, which is my favourite musical? Oh, well, at last, a pretty simple question, Vicky, because my most favourite musical in the entire world, I think, is West Side Story. I first heard the soundtrack to West Side Story in the sixth form at school, and then when, of course, I got to see the film with Natalie Wood, that was it. I was just absolutely hooked. I wanted to play Maria, that was the character. And yes, so West Side Story, I suppose I have to say, that's when I knew what I wanted to do in life. I wanted to play roles in musicals. And so you could say that West Side Story has been my inspiration. And of course, it's the musical that gave Stephen Sondheim his first big break, because Leonard Bernstein asked him to write the lyrics for West Side Story, and since then I've been lucky enough to perform in two of Stephen Sondheim's musicals. One was Sweeney Todd and the other Follies. So all in all, West Side Story and Stephen Sondheim has been major in my life. Alan Fox and Bob Vickers. Well, you say, as fans for the last 25 plus years, having seen you on stage many times at venues all over the UK, is there a concert scheduled anywhere during 2021? Even a one-off in grounds of a stately home, for instance? Well, you know what? It's tricky at the moment. So we are looking at plans to do some concerts in 2021 here in the UK and abroad. But as I say, with travel bans and quarantine measures in place, everything sort of happens very quickly, whether it's on, it's off in terms of the quarantine. And of course, particularly with the social distancing in theatres and so on, that's making it very difficult indeed, because of the revenue that comes into the buildings to pay all the artists and all those involved in putting on a show anywhere, really, unless it's outside, and even then there are a lot of people involved in mounting a performance. So fingers crossed, hopefully a vaccine will come along soon, and that will mean that we'll all be able to get back to some kind of normal. And at that point, I'll be out there. So I hope to see you there. All right, who have we got next? Well, Ed Higby. Ed, your question is, will we be seeing you on stage or screen anytime soon? Well, Ed, in fact, a new BBC One drama filmed last year, they have just announced that it's going to be shown this autumn, and it's written by Mike Bartlett. It's a spin-off, basically, of Dr. Foster, because he wrote that as well. I don't know if you happen to see that. But it's set in a large house in Manchester that's been divided up into 4 flats. And it follows the life of these 4 individual flats and the people that live in these flats. And it's all about, really, I think, what happens when you step outside your own personal space and perhaps look into other people's lives. And so it is dealing with love and loss and birth and death and all the ordinary and extraordinary things and everything else in between, basically. It's got a great cast. It's got Victoria Hamilton in it, Alison Steadman, Peter Davidson, Adrian Lester, Adam James, and Rachel Sterling is also in the cast. So I think it's going to be one well worth looking out for. It's called Life. All right, well, Claire. Hello, Claire. Claire Thompson. And you want to know what's been your favourite moment as an ambassador for the Royal Voluntary Service. Oh, well, I think a visit in February this year with the Duchess of Cornwall to Leicester General Hospital is one that really stands out to me because we visited the patients on the wards. We walked around with the gentleman that takes his trolley to all the wards every day. We went to the little shop in the hospital that sells absolutely everything that you might want while you're in hospital, and your visitors can go there and buy things for you. And as I say, the trolley shop man with his magazines and fruit and snacks and chocolate bars, he does the rounds on the wards, and the Duchess and I went with him. And whilst we were on one of the wards, one of the patients asked the Duchess if I would sing, and she gave me a sort of little look, I think rather worried that she might have to join in, and asked me if I would sing. So I did. I sang to one of the patients' memory, and I must say at the end of the song there wasn't a dry eye on the ward, so I didn't mean to upset anybody, but they all welled up. So I will always remember that. That was a very special moment for me and for the patients, hopefully, because we had a bit of a sing-song. Well, what can I say but thank you to everyone who's asked all the questions, submitted these wonderful questions, and it's been a real pleasure, I must say, in trying to answer them. And what I did want to just sort of end by saying, do try and explore all the rest of the virtual village hall, because there's so many activities here for you to enjoy, and I want to remind you that keeping active and keeping engaged in things, that's what keeps us all going, and it's good for our health and our just general well-being. So do get involved, and I tell you, some of the fun activities that are on here, a particular favourite of mine and the Duchess of Cornwall, as I understand it, is Silver Swans ballet classes. So you might want to have a go at that. It's great fun and very good for your deportment and everything else. And what can I say? Get busy and get out there. Lots of love.